Mm.
Thank you, Paula. Please put yourself.
Hmm.
Ready.
And maybe Art can entertain us while we're waiting for Paula. Hi, Art.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
Good, good.
Where'd Paula go?
Paula, she's a little bit busy. She's coming. She's coming. You know what? I
Okay,
guess
so I think we can start. John knows
we
the
can
place.
start. Yes, we
It's
can start.
you got John. I was running all over the place here.
Okay, perfect.
John,
Uh,
everybody knows John Murphy.
okay, I
Uh,
just want to start for into this. Um, Hi, welcome to our November coffee meeting. My name is Kaya Armagan. I am owner of Flash Limousine and Buses and also president of Illinois Limousine Association. On behalf of myself and our board, I want to say thank you for being here today for everybody. We are happy to see all operators, safety managers, and friends from our industry and join us. I want to give special thank you to John Murphy, Compliance Officer with Illinois Department of Transportation. John has a many years experience with DOT rules and safety requirement, and we are very glad that he's here and share important information with all of us. Also, I want to thank you, our board members and our advisor, Art Rental from Pontrelli Limousine. Also, I want to do special thank you for Paula, our executive director, for setting up all these meetings. Uh, I guess Paula is coming, and then Paula is going to coordinate the meeting, and then I want to turn the microphone to Mr. Murphy. We can start.
Okay, good morning, and thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction, Kaya. We appreciate it. So today we want to do pretty much an overview of what the regulations are that apply to commercial motor vehicles operating passenger carrier vehicles. So let's see, can we trying to share my screen? Let me see if I get that right. Are you seeing my screen okay, Art?
Yes, John, we can see your screen.
Okay, good.
Looks good.
So to introduce myself, my name is John Murphy, and I'm a MCSAP Compliance Officer for the Illinois Department of Transportation. We work in a program for under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and we're considered state partners along with the Illinois State Police. MCSAP is an acronym for Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. So basically, what we do is we do DOT enforcement for passenger and property carriers throughout Illinois that operate in intrastate and interstate commerce. A big part of what we do are new entrant safety audits. Those are a federal program that are designed to educate new motor carriers. So anybody that registers for a DOT number will be contacted by my office, and we'll conduct a new entrant safety audit and see that the regulations are educated, the carrier's educated on the regulations. So that's basically what we do. A big part of what we do is we like to do industry outreach. One way of keeping everybody safe, our belief is that by education. If you're educated on what you need to do to operate safely, that's going to be crucial. So, our goal is to eliminate commercial motor vehicle crashes involving fatalities on Illinois roads and highways. So part of doing that is our new entrant safety audit program. And then we also do compliance visits, DOT roadside inspections, skills performance evaluations. So it's quite a bit. I work with a team of investigators, inspectors that roll out this program. So that's who we are. That's my office phone number and my cell phone number. Reach out to us if you have questions. We'd rather you ask the question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. So here's today's agenda. We're going to talk about the registration requirements, the UCR, or the Unified Carrier Registration, insurance and operating authority registration. And then we'll get into the driver qualifications, hours of service, drug and alcohol testing, and vehicle maintenance. And then we're going to have a question and answer session towards the end. So I guess you could just, send your questions in. You could type them in as we go along as well. So that's the overview, and we just want to do a quick overview of the regulations. So there's basically two types of regulations: commercial regulations and safety regulations. Commercial regulations, that's relevant to operating authority and insurance, and that can apply to anybody operating for hire in interstate commerce. Safety regulations, that's this book here. That's where we come in. They can be confusing by just picking up that book, but where I think a lot of the information comes in are the exceptions to the rules and the applicability. So safety regulations, that's relevant to the operation of vehicles that meet the definition of a commercial motor vehicle. I know Illinois Limousine and Bus Association has a lot of operators that are operating SUVs, vehicles that don't meet the definition. But, they are subject to commercial regulations, which is operating authority and insurance requirements. So under the commercial regulations, unless you're exempted and you're for hire, you're required to have operating authority. Now, for hire has been defined by the FMCSA as transportation that is involving compensation, and it could be through a total package fee. Like, for example, I pay for a hotel and then I get a free ride from the airport to the hotel. Well, that ride's not free. It's part of a package. You paid for that ride when you rented your room. So that's defined as for hire. Safety regulations. Now, unless you're accepted, of course. Motor carriers transporting passengers in commercial motor vehicles must comply with safety regulations. And that's that regulation book we just looked at. Again, to determine whether your bus or van is a commercial motor vehicle, it's necessary to consider your vehicle size, passenger capacity, and in some cases, whether or not you're for hire. So I would like to go over a few definitions and see if these relate to your vehicles that you're operating. So the definition of a commercial motor vehicle is any self-propelled or towed motor vehicle used on a highway in interstate commerce to transport passengers or property when the vehicle, number one, has a gross vehicle or combination weight rating of 10,001 pounds or more, is designed or used to transport more than 8 passengers, including the driver, for compensation, And then if it's 15 passengers or greater, it doesn't have to be for compensation. So those are definitions. And of course, hazardous material, which is typically going to apply to property carriers or truck companies. But we regulate all of those. But so keep in mind, so when we talk about 10,001, that could be your sprinters or more than 8 passengers, 9 to 15 passenger motor vehicle, like a sprinter or a lot of the Transit 350s are out there now. Those are commercial motor vehicles and they are regulated. The safety regulations do apply if they're operating for hire. So now that we know the definition of a commercial motor vehicle, for hire means, again, that they're for compensation. So now the next question is, are we operating in interstate or intrastate commerce? So interstate commerce, that definition applies to a place in a state and a place outside of such states, between two places in a state through another state. And then number three, I have it highlighted between two places in a state as part of trade, traffic, or transportation originating or terminating outside of the state or the United States. So that's where it gets tricky. That's where a little confusion comes in on whether we're operating interstate or not. Interstate commerce is defined based on the cargo. The cargo, in your case, is passengers. So if that cargo or that passenger gets on an airplane in California, flies into Chicago, O'Hare, or Midway, you pick them up at the airport and take them to their hotel in Chicago. That's the final leg of an interstate trip. You just operated in interstate commerce. Um, so, that does meet the definition that, I get that question a lot. Well, I'm only going from, I pick up at the airport and I'm just driving them a couple miles to the hotel in Rosemont. That's interstate commerce. Cargo originated or terminated outside of Illinois. So you just participated in the final leg of an interstate trip. I can't stress that enough. In the trucking world, we look at intermodal containers. They might start out as
Good. How are you?
they might start out in another country even, and they might be on a ship,
Yeah, hold on.
a rail, a truck, and then it's picked up maybe in Chicago at a rail yard and driven to Walmart in Chicago. That's the final leg of an interstate trip. So now that we know that, operating authority. So that's the other part of the commercial regulations. Operating authority can apply to operators of SUVs as well, even though their vehicle doesn't meet the definition of a commercial motor vehicle, but the commercial regulations apply. So they may be required to have operating authority, and the insurance does apply as well, insurance requirement. So recently, I've been told that there's quite a few charters going on right now for schools, typically after school events, sports teams, and that is kind of a busy time. It's just winding down for all the fall sports teams that are involving schools. So we get a lot of questions to try to clarify that. There is such thing as school bus operations, and there is exemptions that apply to them, but that only applies to a school bus. There we go. So a school bus, this is the definition of a school bus. And it's typically going to be a yellow bus that says school bus on it with a stop sign and all of that. So most of our members here at Illinois Limousine and Bus, I don't believe, are operating actual school buses. And then those school buses, the exemptions apply to them only when they're operating from home to school, school to home. So they're picking children or there's school personnel on board and they're going from school to home, home to school. So that's typically not going to apply to a motor coach carrier that's running charters or they're running, after school sport teams or whatever. Those are going to be charters, and the school bus operations does not apply to them. But there is something you do need to know. If your drivers are operating with the Illinois CDL, Illinois has a unique requirement. They have what's called a charter endorsement, and it's if you're doing a charter for a pre-primary, primary, or secondary school, so we're looking at kindergarten through 12th grade, those charters require, if it's a CDL with an Illinois CDL, it requires a C or a charter endorsement or a school bus endorsement. So if the driver already has a school bus endorsement, he won't need the charter endorsement. I keep changing my uh, thing prematurely. So if that's the case, the Illinois Secretary of State, they have some pretty good information on their website on how to obtain that C endorsement or that school bus endorsement. And again, it only applies to Illinois CDL licensed drivers. So if you're a bordering company, I know we have a lot of companies that are downstate that have Missouri drivers or Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa. Those drivers, if their CDL is not an Illinois CDL, they would not be required to have that charter. Okay.
Even
So
though
now we know.
John, even though they're operating in Illinois?
Yes, that's correct. It only applies to CDL drivers that have Illinois CDLs.
Wow.
So it's an Illinois law is why that is. And they don't, Illinois doesn't regulate other, the reciprocity with CDLs. They don't regulate, nationally the CDL requirements. But good point. So now we know how a commercial motor vehicle is defined. We know how for hire is defined, and we know what interstate commerce is defined. So let's see what's required. What do we need to do? So first of all, if you're operating in interstate commerce, operating a commercial motor vehicle, if a vehicle meets that definition, we have to register. We get a US DOT number. So the FMCSA website, you can go online, fmcsa.dot.gov, and apply for a US DOT number. The operating authority can be done there as well. There's no fee for the US DOT number, but there is a $300 fee, I believe, for the operating authority. And operating authority, what goes along with that is insurance on file. You have to have insurance on file. So there's a link to the unified registration system where you'd file your application, or MCS 150 is the form you fill out to get a DOT number. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration website has tons of information on there. I highly recommend to take a look at that if you're looking at if you're new to get into this business as well. UCR, there's also a UCR fee that is required to be paid yearly. It's based on how many vehicles you have. I'm not sure exactly what the fees are. If you have 3 or 4 vehicles, I think it's, a couple $100. I'm not exactly sure, but the website for that is ucr.gov, and that's regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission for Illinois operators. Each state has a different way of doing it, but ucr.gov, that's their website. So you can go online, put your DOT number in there and pay that fee. But I highlight .gov because there's also a third party that has a website that looks pretty much the same, but it's ucr.com. So if you Google it, it might come up ucr.com. That's not the government website, as I just want to stress that. There may be a different fee there. It's a third party, but ucr.gov is the government website. Typically, the carriers are going to pay the fee in December, and that'll cover them for the following year. So come 2026, that fee has to be updated and paid come December. You could do it now even if you're a current motor carrier. Okay, insurance requirements. So vehicle seating capacity, 16 passengers or more, including the driver. We always count the driver. It's the most important passenger in that vehicle, right? If there was a crash, that's a body that could be involved. So we count the driver. I know as a motor carrier, as an operator, you don't count the driver. You can't sell that seat, right? But we count it because that's the important person in control. So it's $5 million liability and less than 16 or 15 or less. And it doesn't, it's just 15 or less. So anything from 1 to 15, the requirement is 1.5 million for motor carriers operating in interstate commerce. So that does apply to the SUV drivers that are, running 7, 8 passenger vehicles. 1.5 million is required, and operating authority may be required unless they're exempt based on where they're going. That can be different depending on their operation. But the insurance that's a federal requirement if they're operating interstate. The city has their rules, the state has some rules, and the feds have their rules. So depending on how you're operating and what type of vehicles, and if you're for hire or not, that's where the insurance requirements can fall in. And the other thing I want to mention is the form MCS 90B. So that's the endorsement from the insurance company. You are required to have that on file at the principal place of business. It's a really important document to protect your liability. That's an endorsement from the insurance company. They're saying, yes, you are, you are insured, you're covered. A lot of times you'll get that with your policy along with all the information on your policy, but not always. So, go through your policy. If they don't provide it, then, just request it. They will provide it upon request. That's one of the first things we're going to ask for when we come out and do a safety audit or a compliance visit. Okay, registration requirements. So before operations, you have to get a DOT number, and then you also have to file that MCS 150 form every 2 years. And if you don't, they will inactivate your number. So it's important that you do update it and fill it out through what they call the biennial update. This is the schedule. So if your US DOT number ends in a 1, you do it in January, right? A 7, July, it's the 7th month of the year. And if the second from last number is odd, you do it in odd years. And if it's even, you do it in even years. So for example, if your DOT number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6 is the 6th month of the year, that's June, and the 5 is odd. So June of odd years, you're required to update your MCS 150. And you're also required to do that as things change. So if you add drivers, take away drivers, add vehicles, take away vehicles, you want to keep that information current. You can update as many times as you want, but a minimum of every 2 years on those dates. If nothing changes, you stay the same. I always recommend at least do it once a year. This way you won't forget and you won't have to worry about it. But if you don't do it, you will be inactivated. And if we find a vehicle roadside that's operating with an inactive number, that's an out of service violation. So you'd have to get it corrected before you can move that vehicle. So it's really important that you stay on top of that. So now we want to hire a driver, right? So what we need to do is provide a driver qualification file. And this is specific to drivers. It starts out with an employment application. We do have examples of that online as well. It's specific to drivers. It asks questions like, have you ever been denied a permit or license to drive, specific to drivers. You can't use just any general application. Previous employer inquiries, we want to look at the drivers, contact their previous employers and make sure that they're qualified drivers. Drivers have to be medically qualified. So a DOT medical card is required. And then we're going to pull a copy of their driving record. In Illinois, it's called a driver's license abstract. But if it's other states, they might call it something different, but it's a motor vehicle report. And it's going to tell you if you want to see that the driver has a valid license, that's appropriate to the vehicle they're driving with the correct endorsements, and that they're going to be showing that they're non-accepted interstate. That's one of the options that they have to choose if they're operating interstate. We're going to look for a certificate of road test or a copy of the CDL. The CDL is the equivalent of a road test. We know that when you were issued your CDL, you took a road test. And then annually, we get a copy of the driving record, or the motor carrier needs to do that. And then they do an annual review, and they're going to just check that driving record, make sure that the driver's license is still valid and everything's up to date.
Hey, John, real
Yes.
quick question about the medical certification. My understanding is that I don't have any CDL drivers. but I do have commercial vehicles. That the CDL drivers, that is now all electronic. So how would someone go about getting that medical certificate if it's electronic?
Oh, good question. Thanks for asking that. The medical examiner is still required to give copies of the medical card. They don't have an avenue to put that on a non-CDL. But if I'm running a Sprinter with a vehicle with a license that's not a CDL, I'm going to have to carry the medical certificate. And the medical examiners are still required to provide them, but make sure your drivers ask for them because CDL drivers, they might not be, asking for them, but I would recommend to, make sure they ask for them. And even if you're a CDL driver, get a copy of that certificate because it does belong in the driver file when we come out to do investigations. But good question. Thank you for asking. I hope that answers it. Passenger carriers, hours of service. Okay. So the leading cause of commercial vehicle crash is driver fatigue, right? So we get tired. We don't have the reaction times that we would have when we're well rested. So that's a big problem, when drivers are fatigued. Uh, so we are regulated. Drivers can't work more than 15 hours after 8 hours rest. So they're required to have 8 hours rest before their day even begins. And then after that, during that 15-hour tour of duty, they can only drive 10 of those 15 hours. And we also look at there's also a 70-hour rule. Drivers can't drive after being on duty 70 hours in any 8-day period. So after 5 days, if they've got 70 hours on duty, they can't drive until get some of those hours fall off. So that's something that that fatigue sets in. 70 hours in 8 days is a lot of time to work. And 15-hour work days to me too much. And if they're driving 10 hours, that's quite a bit as well. So they can't exceed that. So that's regulated. And along with those hours of service, we have to show that we're keep records of when the driver's driving. And that's where the electronic logging device comes in. So over the past years, we've required the drivers to do a logbook. And a few years ago, it came out electronic logging has been required with some exceptions to that rule. But typically, the ELD is going to be for road drivers or drivers that, you have an ELD system installed in your vehicles and you can run the ELD even if you are local as well. But one of the exemptions that probably apply to a lot of us that are just operating locally is the 150 air mile radius. So you're exempt from the ELD, but you have to follow certain rules to obtain that exemption. So you got to start and end their day at their normal work reporting location. So you can't start your day out in the field somewhere and end it somewhere else. It's got to be typically it's going to be at the principal place of business where the vehicles are parked. You start your day there, you have to end it there. During your tour of duty, you have to stay within 150 air mile radius, and you have to keep time records. The motor carrier keeps time records. What time the driver reports for duty, total number of hours the driver is on duty, and the time the driver is released from duty. And then if they're intermittent or first-time drivers, we would keep records of their previous 7 days as well. Because any time worked will apply towards that 70-hour rule or work time, whether they're driving or not, or whoever they're working for. Paula, how are we doing? Are you with us?
Yes. Do you want to
Any
stop?
questions?
Do you want to stop and take a couple of questions?
Yeah, would you like to do that?
Absolutely. Hang on a second. Okay. Um, there was a general question here from one of our operators about what about Division One school transportation? I think they were looking for some specificity on that one.
What's the question? No.
Requirements for Division One school transportation?
Well, there's a whole different section for that as well. But the school transportation, as far as the state goes, it is regulated if it's intrastate, and it's also regulated interstate. Um, but home to school, school to home is the exception. So they're not regulated under 390 through 399 if for school bus operation. Interstate. Intrastate, and we're talking a yellow school bus now, okay? Um, so if they're intrastate, Illinois does give the exemption for that as well for charters. So it doesn't have to be home to school, school to home for those exceptions. So Illinois does have its own rules. So like for the DOT medical card, they have their own medical exam and they have a different drug and alcohol testing requirement. So the school bus permit that comes along with, uh, well, it's an annual physical and it's a little bit
Yes.
different than the DOT physical. And it's also
Yes.
includes an annual
Yes,
drug
I answered
test.
him.
I'm sorry? Um, so that requires the annual drug test as well. And then if they're doing anything outside of school bus operations, then typically they're going to have a DOT medical card along with the endorsements required. So I hope that helps answer that question. I think she's bringing up another question.
First, I
Maybe.
have to unmute myself. Okay.
There
Can you
she is.
explain what operating authority is?
Sure, that's another good question. So operating authority basically is connected to the insurance. So to have operating authority, that's your MC number you might hear it referred to as, and that's connected with insurance. So if you're a for-hire motor carrier, you're required to have operating authority if you're operating in interstate commerce. Um, that operating authority is an avenue for your insurance company to file their insurance. So the public can go to licensing and insurance website, L&I, we call it, and we can see that you have insurance on file. So there's different types of operating authority. Basically, it's going to be property or passenger. And that operating authority allows you to operate for hire as long as you have the insurance on file. So if you don't have insurance on file, you'll lose operating authority, which takes away your right to be able to operate, if that explains it, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
Um,
it's required for hire motor carriers. So if you're private motor carriers of property or there are no federal insurance requirements, just the local requirements apply. So they wouldn't need operating authority. So I don't think we have anybody in this group that operates as a private motor carrier.
when you say private, are you talking about like if I'm driving around someone who is an owner of a company vehicle, that kind of thing?
Well, that could be a good example of a private motor carrier of passengers. See, that's broken down into different categories, the type of operation. So a private motor carrier of passengers business means they're not for hire, right?
Right.
So a good example would be, say, United Airlines owns and operates its own bus, and they only use it to pick up their employees and drive them from the terminal to the administrative building or
Mhm.
something like that. There's also private motor carrier passengers non-business. That's typically going to be like a nonprofit, a 501(c)(3) that maybe the YMCA or something, or a church bus that operates, it doesn't operate for any fee. There's no money involved or compensation involved. So that's private. So there are some exceptions to the rules for them. They're not for hire, therefore they wouldn't need operating authority, and the federal insurance requirements do not apply to them at this point.
Okay. All right. Are sedans required to have 1.5 million?
Yes, if they're operating in interstate commerce.
Okay. That says it right there. There was just a
I believe
comment
that
from
was it.
Scott Woodruff out of Iowa. Make sure the MCS 90 is signed by your insurance company because 2 years in a row he had an issue. And it wasn't signed by his insurance. So that was a reminder to all of you.
And
Thank
thank
you
you
for
for
that,
that.
Scott.
Yeah, that's something that we look at is that it's got to be endorsed. So if
Yes.
they send you the MCS 90, if it's a passenger carrier, make sure it's the MCS 90B boy. For trucks, it's just MCS 90. And then it has to be endorsed by the insurance company showing the proper level of insurance that's required. So good point there as well.
Thank you,
So we're going to
Scott.
move on, I think, right?
I think we have,
One other thing, if you are running cars and you need your insurance registered, you need to make sure you tell the insurance company to register it because they typically don't. Uh,
ah,
You'll end up without having authority because you thought they registered it, but they didn't.
Yeah, and that's something you can look at online, licensing and insurance website. You can Google licensing and insurance, and then it's open to the public. You just type in the DOT number, and it will show you your operating authority is active and your insurance is on file. But that's a good point as well.
yes. How about one more, real quick?
Sure.
Should a company be updating their mileage every year, even though it's due every 2 years?
Absolutely. Your mileage, along with everything else, should remain accurate. You want to make sure you have the correct number of drivers. The mileage, that's why I always recommend, if it's due in June of odd years, do it every June. Put in your mileage, however you track it. Usually the ELD systems are, and if you have one, is a good way of tracking it. It's how most operators are running them. But yeah, keep that updated. Keep in mind your accident, your crash evaluation is based on miles between crashes. So Safe Care is allowed 1.5 crashes per million miles traveled. So if you're a small operator, you're not going to do a million miles in a year, but two accidents could affect your safety rating. So that's something you want to be aware of. So give yourself credit for all the miles that you actually are doing, especially if there's a big increase or decrease in the miles. I would recommend to go online and go ahead and update that.
Okay. All right, let's get back to it. We'll ask some more
All
questions in a
right.
few minutes.
Um,
There was one
so
more,
that was our,
there was one more that Tim brought up, and it's asked about commercial motor vehicle, the commercial zone exemptions, um, which John can go over, and you probably have to read them to understand them. But the other thing that they're asking is, if this is the case, why aren't and this insurance is required, why aren't the airport and city authorities, why don't they know this, or why aren't they requesting it or requiring it?
I thought we weren't going to ask the hard questions, Art.
I
No,
didn't
that's a good
promise
question.
that.
No, that's a good question, and I hope I can answer it. First of all, the good question regarding the inner city zones, and that's why I stress when I talk about for hire operating authority, unless you're exempt. So 372 117 D3, I think, is the regulation that exempts pickups at O'Hare. So Part 372, that exempts the operating authority for operators within 25 miles of the borders of an airport. So all airports, any airport pickups, as long as you stay within 25 miles of the border, those are exempt zones. There's also exempt city zones that are in the regulations that can be, so you need to know where you're operating. Um, and that the one specific to O'Hare, it's in the federal regulations, that goes pretty much from O'Hare to Wisconsin almost. Then it actually goes to Route 30 to the south into Indiana. So it's way beyond the 25 miles, specific for O'Hare Airport. And there's like two or three other airports throughout the nation that are actually listed that way. But all airports, you get 25 miles. So, and then there's also inner city zones as well that, you'd have to look up and see where you're actually operating from. So I hope that answers that. Now, the question about the different requirements based on different, you got the FMCSA, you got the US DOT, you got the Illinois Department of Transportation, the Secretary of State, and then you have all the municipalities. So they all have their own set of rules. Um, And I don't know if I can explain that, any better than, you have to follow the rules that apply to you. Why the city does what the city does and why the feds do what they do and the state does what they do, I'm sure they all have their reasons. And, I guess one set of rules probably would go good, but that's the country we live in. We have different rules based on different things. And when we're in transportation, one of the challenges, like for being a property carrier, when I go into Kentucky, I might have different rules than I have in Illinois. So not only do I need to know the federal rules, but I need to know what the state requires as well. So the states can always do their own rules or even greater than, the federal rules. So
Well,
I wish
I,
I could probably come give you a
I,
better
I
explanation.
can add to it, John, because I kind of drilled down to this and asked this question until I was annoying. Um,
No.
Basically, the way this lays out is in the case of the city of Chicago, they issue us a license to operate in the city of Chicago. We can legally pick up at O'Hare Airport and drop off in the city of Chicago without any real operating authority required. With that being said, if we go somewhere else, then we need to get a different authority, and it's up to us to get that authority. The only thing they're not addressing is the 1.5 million to come out of the airport if you're doing interstate commerce. But other than that, as far as the license being issued for what we do, they issue $350,000 to operate in Chicago and operate in Chicago alone. What they don't do is they don't say that, if you're going to the airport, you need to have 1.5. And that's, I think, where they missed the boat. They missed the ball, in my opinion, but I probably got
Yeah,
myself.
well, yeah, like I say, they don't regulate interstate commerce, so
No.
that's pretty much where it goes, where it ends, I guess. But actually, I wish I could, shed a better light on that, but that's not, I don't make the rules. I'm not really sure exactly how all that works as well, but
Well, I mean, it brings it up because we have brought it up to them and to the city, and they say they go by what the state is telling them to do. So, I mean, it's probably not a question we want to get too far into today, but it's something we, as an association, have talked about many times because it's confusing for the operators too.
Right.
I understand. Yeah.
It's hugely confusing because try to explain it to an operator who thinks he's doing the right thing. Well, the city told me to have this, and that's where uh, our need for education is strong because it's hard enough for us to understand it, and then we're trying to get them to know what they really need to be completely compliant and go across state lines or go interstate or whatever. So that has been a longstanding issue.
It's a confusing thing because the city's telling them one thing, the state's telling them another thing, and their insurance salesman is telling them something completely different.
Yeah,
And we come along and say you need 1.5, and they're like, oh, we don't need 1.5. You don't know what you're talking about.
yeah.
Right, right. And I get that. Good example too is, and and it's not in the presentation. I want to mention about the vehicle registrations. They'll say, well, if you're for hire, you need a PT plate, or if you don't have an apportion plate.
Right.
And, well, he's got a weight plate, he's got a D plate or whatever. When you go to Secretary of State, they don't know that you're for hire when you buy a license plate. They don't know what you're doing. So they give you what you ask for.
Mhm.
And then when we pull you over and give you a ticket for, running with the wrong vehicle registration, you're like, well, that's what the Secretary of State told me, but you didn't tell them that you were operating for hire, so that's something that I want to make clear is a weight plate is not acceptable for a for hire motor carrier operating a Sprinter van or a Transit 350, any of those vehicles for that matter. And then when you get into the bigger vehicles, if it's 26,001 or three axle, you get into the apportion plates.
Well,
So those are registration requirements, and Art knows more about them than I do. I think all your vehicles are
everything's important.
portion.
But, I bought weight plates for years and went to the state and brought the insurance and gave them the certificate of insurance for passenger transportation. And I just had weight plates on it for years and never actually made a big difference. And I went to PT plates and I was having problems with people trying to regulate us that really shouldn't have been regulating us because we were regulated by John. And then I just went to apportion plates and we're regulated by, plates say who we're regulated by. There's a whole confusion up.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna move us along if that's okay.
Yes.
All right, take it away, John.
All righty. Drug and alcohol testing. Um, Keep in mind, drug and alcohol testing or DOT drug and alcohol testing only apply to drivers who operate vehicles that require a CDL. Okay. And in the bus world, it's 16 passenger or greater, including the driver. Or, of course, if the vehicle has a gross vehicle weight rating of greater than 26,001 or greater than 26,000, then the drug and alcohol testing rules apply. So when you hire a driver, the first thing you want to do is give them a pre-employment drug test. That's required, and you need to get a copy of the drug test negative results on file. And we do a query for the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse is where positive tests are reported to. So you have to do a query on your CDL driver to make sure that they are not prohibited, that they can drive a commercial motor vehicle. And then additionally, you're going to do a query annually for those drivers as well. So you got the pre-employment test. You have to get the driver's consent to do a drug and alcohol clearinghouse query. So you're going to get that as well. Now, you have the negative test. He's got a clean clearinghouse record. The next thing you do is you enter him into a random testing program. So he or she needs to be, now they have a negative pre-employment test. They're enrolled in a random drug and alcohol testing program. Now they can drive. There's two options for the random testing. There's consortium, and that's where drivers are pulled from different companies. Typically, if I'm an owner operator, I couldn't have my own pool, random testing pool. I would join a consortium and I'd be pooled with other drivers, and a third party would administer a consortium program. And then, of course, we don't recommend if you have less than 10 drivers, but if you have 10 or more drivers, you can actually have your own pool of drivers where you meet the requirements. There's companies that do it. You can do it yourself, but there are certain ways it has to be done. You have to have a scientifically valid method to draw the names, and there's a requirement on how they have to be equally spread throughout the year. And then there's minimum requirements on the testing, 50% for drugs and 10% for alcohol currently under this current year. So that's your random. And then there's also post-crash testing. So before we determine whether or not we need a post-crash test, we need to know what the definition of an accident is. And I don't really like the name accident. We call it a crash because all crashes are preventable, right? So there's no accident about it. It's a crash. So, but the definition, except as provided in paragraph 2, an occurrence involving a commercial motor vehicle operating on a highway in interstate or intrastate commerce, which results in a fatality, a bodily injury that's treated away from the scene, immediately treated away from the scene. An ambulance comes, it takes one of the persons involved in the accident or in the crash and is immediately taken to a medical facility and treated. And the third thing is a tow truck. If one of the vehicles renders disabling damage and requires to be towed away from the scene of the crash, now you've had a crash. So one of those three things. If there's a fatal injury, if there's an injury treated away from the scene or a vehicle towed due to it rendering disabling damage, you had an accident. So now that we know we had an accident, the next question is, do we do a post-crash test? Some operators are like, well, yeah, we automatically test all the drivers. It's not how it works. You can't do a DOT drug test or alcohol test for that matter unless it's required. All the testing has got specific rules on when you can and cannot do it. If your company policy allows for testing no matter what, just because they're involved, you could do a non-DOT test, but you can't do a DOT test unless it's required. So this chart that we have up now is when to test. A lot of companies like the dispatch will have this. It's actually 382-303. It's right in the regulation book, or you can Google it, and they have it right under the glass on their desk. They get a call, I just had a crash. So you're going to ask these questions. Is there a fatality involved? Was anybody injured? Was a vehicle towed? So once you get that, the next question is going to be, was a citation issued, right? So if there's a fatality involved, well, you always test, no matter what. If you get a citation or not, you test. And then the injury or the disabling damage, the towaway, only if the driver of the commercial motor vehicle gets a ticket or a citation, you test. If they don't get one, you do not test. You can do your own non-DOT test, but you can't do a DOT test. With that, you need a drug and alcohol testing policy. The thing, companies do have these policies, but oftentimes we see they don't meet the requirements. So 382-601 B 1 through 12, there's 12 elements that must be in your policy. You can Google that number. It'll show you what the 12 elements, the requirements are to be in your policy. Training for supervisors. All supervisors must undergo 60 minutes of training on the misuse of alcohol and the misuse of controlled substances. And what that does is it gives them the okay to conduct reasonable suspicion testing, right? So you can't test the driver that you feel reasonably that they're under the influence of something unless you've had this training. So that's something that we would ask for when we come do your safety audit or your compliance visit. That kind of covers the drug and alcohol. Paula, do you think, did you have any questions regarding that you want to stop for a second and
Yeah, let
answer?
me take a quick look. I don't think so. With drug and alcohol, let's see. I did have one question about this drug and alcohol. Is there a recommended course or training that's available for them for the supervisors, or do they need to go out to agencies and find it?
Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone they recommend, but
Okay.
what I would say is it's readily available and it is relatively not expensive. So be careful. I would reach out to whoever's doing your random testing, see if they might provide it. Usually they just see a video or they do it online. It's just 2 hours.
Okay.
But some of them, I think, might even offer it for free if you're like a customer there. So you'd have to reach out. But I've seen people Google it and they've done it for $35 online or whatever. So
Oh, okay, good.
it's not hard to do. But I
Did,
always recommend it. You're only required to do it once, but we recommend to get, to do it yearly and then just to stay informed on what's going on. And just as a refresher, it's not a bad idea to do it from time to time.
there's another question too. What are the drug and alcohol requirements for 15 passenger vehicle or less?
Well, there are none. The drug and alcohol testing does not apply to vehicles and drivers that are operating vehicles that do not require a CDL. So the 9 to 15, as long as it's under 26,001, that wouldn't require a CDL or a commercial driver's license. Therefore, drug and alcohol testing does not apply. What most companies will do, they'll do a non-DOT program, but they're on their own there. They come up with whatever they come up with. But you're not allowed to do DOT testing unless it is a CDL required vehicle that the driver's operating.
You have a question. You see the one, Paul, what would you advise carriers that elect to do a non-DOT, evidently drug screening, and the result comes back positive? However, the DOT test cannot be issued in that specific event. But
I haven't gotten to it yet.
huh?
Yes.
Well, I think what they're saying is they're asking what would be what would you do if they came back with a positive test? And that's something you want to think about, and you should include that in your policy. So the 382-601 B 1 through 12, those elements, one of the things is what happens when a driver tests positive. So that's something that your company needs to come up with. And they can add that to their policy for non-DOT testing as well. And then whatever they come up with, but it's not regulated under the DOT.
Okay. All right. I think we can keep going.
Okay, let's talk about vehicle maintenance. So when we do the safety audit or we do the compliance visit, we're going to look at your maintenance files. You are required to have them. The first thing we're going to look at is the federal annual inspection. So your vehicles need to be inspected under the federal program. Now it's Appendix A inspection. That has to be done every 12 months or annually. And there's a 14-month document retention requirement. So typically your maintenance file is going to have two. It'll have the current one and the previous one. That's going to meet the retention requirements for the documentation. Then, in addition to that, if your vehicle's registered in Illinois, Illinois requires a safety lane inspection every 6 months. So passenger carriers are required both. There's some exceptions for property carriers, but when it comes to passenger carriers, they need the state 6 month and they need the federal 12-month. And if they're a motor coach, they need a safety lane 6 month, but they can't get the 12-month at a safety lane if it's a motor coach. FMCSA doesn't recognize Illinois safety lane requirements. Therefore, they're not allowed to do 12-month federal inspections on a motor coach bus. So you can get that done, whoever does them at different maintenance facilities.
And if you're doing sedans and SUVs with the city, for example, you need 2 6-month inspections. So if you have if your business license is in the city of Chicago, you do 2 safety lane inspections a year. Sorry, John.
No, you are correct. That's going to apply to states. The federal 12-month won't apply to the SUVs livery, but the state 6-month does apply. So you'll need it twice a year. Then along with that's the taxi cab one over on Pershing, right? That's a different thing.
That's for vehicles over five. Art's on the phone here. If I'm wrong, he'll correct me. Your model years are 5 years or older. Then there's a mandated annual inspection by the city of Chicago for limo. Yes.
Good point. Yes. So the maintenance files, 396.3B 1 through 4. There's 4 elements that are required to be in your file along with the inspections. The first one is required identifying information. So your maintenance file should have the company number, the make, the serial or the VIN number, the year, and the tire size. So that's the required identifying information. Number 2, a means to indicate the nature and due dates of intended maintenance. So that's your preventive maintenance schedule. We all know we go to the 10-minute oil change, they put a sticker in the windshield that says come back in 3 months or 3,000 miles, right? That's a means to indicate the nature and due dates of intended maintenance. So it should be a little bit more than an oil change, right? So, but your scheduled maintenance or preventive maintenance, there's basically 2 types of maintenance, scheduled and unscheduled. So we want to eliminate the unscheduled maintenance, flat tires, dead motors, whatever. And we do that by having a good preventive maintenance schedule. So for example, we'll look at, this motor coach bus every 10,000 miles, they bring it in, they change the oil, they have a 99-point inspection, they look at the brakes, they're looking at the tread depth on the tires, they have a whole checklist. So that preventive maintenance schedule, it should be designed based on how you use your vehicle and what the manufacturer recommends. And then you need to follow it. So you come up with, we don't tell you how often you have to do it, but we do tell you that you do have to maintain your vehicle and you do have to have a schedule to do it. You have to have a means to keep track of when it's due for the next one, is what that says. And then 3, you just have to document the times and dates the date and the function that you did. So, I replaced the tires today on this date, I changed the oil, whatever it is, that goes in the maintenance file as well. And being a passenger carrier, every 90 days, you have to inspect your emergency exits. So, push out windows, emergency doors, any emergency exits have to be inspected every 90 days. And then you document that as well. So that's our maintenance. I don't know if we had maintenance questions come up, Paula.
I haven't seen any.
Okay, good. We'll keep moving then. The marking requirement. So, um, registration number preceded by the letters USDOT. You have to have your legal name as it's listed on your registration or on your MCS 150, um, or your DBA name, as long as that's listed on the MCS 150. It has to be visible from 50 feet standing still during daylight hours in sharply contrasting colors. So, an example, Murphy Motor Coach, that would be the legal name or the doing business as name, and then USDOT and then the number. Pretty simple. Now, if you have two names on your vehicle, so say Murphy Motor Coach is operating a bus that has a different name on it. So it has to say operated by above Murphy Motor Coach. So Murphy Motor Coach would be, that's the company that's registered with the DOT number, but they're running a bus that says, Chicago Tours or something. Chicago Tours is on the side of the bus, but it's got to show operated by whoever the DOT registration applies to. Common violations. So these are the inspection violations that we run across. So when we do your safety audit, we're going to come out and inspect your vehicles, and then that's going to be an ongoing thing when we come out for compliance visits. If you're a motor coach operator, those are required every 2 to 3 years under MAP 21 legislation. You're required to undergo a comprehensive ratable compliance review. Compliance review comes out with you're either a condition or a rating, a satisfactory rating, which is good, a conditional, which isn't good, but you're allowed to continue to operate, or unsatisfactory. So the unsatisfactory gives you 45 days, I think, to correct anything before they would stop you from operating. So motor coach is held to the highest standard under MAP 21 or federal congressional legislation signed off by Obama years ago. So that's where we get to know you. We'll be seeing you on a regular basis. So when we do that, we're going to come and we're going to inspect your vehicles. And I just wanted to share some common violations that we run across on a regular basis. Brakes out of adjustment, that's a common violation. Inoperative lights, that's gone down somewhat since the LED lights came into play. I always recommend when those LEDs start going out, go ahead and replace that bulb. When LEDs are good, they last a long time, but a lot of times if they are burnt out, we'll see there's moisture in that. There's something wrong there. It's getting moisture in it. That's what's killing that bulb. So expired inspections, they'll have an annual inspection, but it's over 12 months old, or a state 6 month is over 6 months old. Unpaid UCR fees. When we type in your DOT number, it's going to come up right away and let us know that you're up to date on your UCR. Exhaust leaks. If you're operating a cutaway bus, we run across those are not uncommon, and those are really serious violations because, if that carbon monoxide permeates the vehicle and your drivers are in them, they might be sitting in them all day waiting on their customers. So not only are the customers affected, but the driver could be affected in a terrible way. So we look really close at that. We want to make sure that you understand that you want to check those systems on a regular basis. Biennial updates. Your DOT registration could be inactivated because the biennial update wasn't done. So that's important to stay on top of that. Defective, inoperative, inadequate, or emergency exits that are not properly marked. Those are all out of service violations as well. I know they have those stickers on the windows, says emergency exit, release lever, push window. If those are peeled off by your customers or whoever's doing it, that could become a violation. So a lot of companies we recommend, have some extra stickers if that's a problem for your company where the driver checks those on his pre-trip inspection. Make sure that happens. If there's an event that occurs that emergency exit is needed, it could be catastrophic if they, didn't know how to open it. So those are common violations. And one last thing I wanted to talk about was the basics. So The way we do things is it's a data-driven program, and these are the basics, or the behavior analysis and safety improvement categories. So we break it down into categories of unsafe driving, crash, hours of service, vehicle maintenance, drug and alcohol testing, and then hazmat or hazardous material for typically, property carriers. And we look at driver fitness and insurance. So if you look at these categories, these are all things that occurred that probably caused a crash. So if you're good in each category, the likelihood of you having a crash is going to be reduced quite a bit. And one thing I noticed about going and visiting companies, the most um, successful companies that are doing really well, they all take safety seriously. They have safety management in place. They do a really good job with that. So if I would recommend anything, I would say go ahead and make sure that you're educated on the safety rules. Reach out to us, reach out to the industry. This organization, Illinois Limousine and Buses, really has, you guys' best interest in mind, obviously. And that's about all we have today. Thank you. And if you have any more questions,
Oh, I got a few. You ready?
sure.
Okay. Let's see here. Give me a second to scroll. Uh, I let's see. Did we answer that one? Commercial zone exclusion. All right. Um, there was a question about uh let's see. Well, I made a comment and I'll throw it out there. So city and state should be educating the license holders because again, they're setting them up to fail. Getting in an accident with a sedan and SUV without the proper insurance can cause a lawsuit. That is food for thought, and we'll probably take that one and have more conversation at the board about what other education we can do. Um, Another question that came through. Okay, so we have Annette and she runs trolleys here in the Naperville area. I do not leave Illinois. My trolleys are safety tested every 6 months. My drivers have CDLs, passenger endorsement, medical cards, and are randomly drug and alcohol tested. Do I need to register for a DOT number?
Well, if you're not operating in interstate commerce, no.
Okay. But everything else she's doing is
The one thing I would say about the trolleys is make sure that you have adequate emergency exits. I've run across that with those trolleys. They're not always have an adequate number or properly marked emergency exits. But it is a commercial motor vehicle. It is regulated under the Illinois Motor Carrier Safety Regulations since you're operating intrastate. And Illinois has adopted the federal regulations. So basically, minus the insurance and the registration requirement, that vehicle should have a PT plate on it. And, the federal insurance requirements and the federal, registration for DOT number does not apply to you. There is no registration requirement for motor carriers of passengers that are for hire in Illinois operating intrastate.
So John, just to be clear on that, if I have a 25 passenger limo bus and I never go out of the state and I never go to the airport,
Mhm.
the city of Chicago requirement is $1 million of insurance. I need a CDL license naturally to drive it. But other than that, you really have no authority over me, right?
Well, the CDL rules, drug and alcohol testing, like again, Illinois has adopted the federal regulations. So a driver qualification file, medical card, that all applies. Like I said, the differences are, like you said, the insurance. So you'd be good there because you're not regulated federally. So the federal requirement wouldn't apply. Then you don't have to register for a DOT number because you don't operate interstate.
But the drivers still have to be CDL. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
So the drug and alcohol testing and all that doesn't apply because they're not.
No, it does
Oh,
apply.
it does. Excuse me. Okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, any CDL required vehicle is federally regulated for the CDL rules and the drug and alcohol testing rules.
That's probably something we have to make sure, because we have a couple of operators that I know of that are intrastate. They never leave Illinois. They are strictly they're like in that they do local runs, weddings, things like that. But
Yeah.
they have CDL drivers in the vehicles.
Yeah, and they need a medical card, they need all of that. They need a driver qualification file. Again, Illinois has adopted the federal regulations, so the Illinois motor carrier safety regulations apply to them. And they're basically the same rules with the exception of insurance.
Yeah, everything but insurance.
Pretty much, yeah.
Why not insurance? Any idea?
Well, because Illinois's got a different set of rules for insurance, I guess. Illinois has their insurance rules for intrastate, I guess.
Yeah, I just you wouldn't be able to answer it, but it would be beyond me to understand why Illinois would adopt all the federal regulations and all the federal policies, but miss out on the insurance.
Well, they have industry organizations like yours that have lobbyists. I don't know.
No, it's a good question for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. A US DOT number is free. I don't think you need motor carrier authority, which costs money. I don't know what that means.
What they're asking if the DOT number, yeah, so the registration to get a DOT number is free. There's no
Yeah.
fee. But the operating authority, I believe it's $300.
No, that
But-
was in response to the
Okay.
trolley person.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Because she was asking if she needed a US DOT number. The US DOT number is free, so there's
Right.
it's no harm, no foul, really, in getting it. It's the motor carrier authority she does not need. Therefore, don't spend the money. That
Right.
was what that comment was.
Got it.
Okay, but
Okay.
if they do have a DOT number, they may have to pay a UCR fee if they're operating interstate. So
Right.
there is a fee, an annual fee that you pay.
Okay. Just
Yeah, but that's
I
you said
understand
that's interstate, not intrastate. I mean,
Oh,
there's a majority of the states require you to have a US DOT number, even if you're intrastate. So that's
okay.
like
Yeah, there's no
I'm in
UCR
Kansas.
fee.
Kansas happens to be one of them.
Okay, yeah. Illinois, you can apply for a DOT number in intrastate, although it's not required
Right.
for intrastate.
Really, that's the majority of the questions.
But any-
Yes, the session is recorded and we will provide copies of the slide deck. Does anybody have any other questions?
I have a question. Would operators be interested in having a call with the federal, state, and city regulators that determine why, to completely understand why the regulations are different for each type of licensing?
That could be a very long call. I'm just kidding. I think what we should do is take it back as a board and figure out the right way to that's a big chunk out of the elephant. So we're gonna have to figure out the best way to kind of coordinate that. Maybe we can talk to even John about that offline too. Because it would help because there still is some confusion for the local operators about what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. Why is the insurance different? This and that. So good question. I think we just have to take it back as a board and figure out the right. You could take yourself off of mute because you're talking. Okay, there you go. All right.
Yeah, I think that's a question that's above my pay grade. I don't make the rules and I don't know why they make them. My job's really to help you interpret them
Right.
of what exists. And that's pretty much where it ends with me. As far as making the rules, that's comes through legislation and that. But as an organization, it's a great question, but I don't know that I would be the one that would be able to answer any of that.
Oh wait.
In all honesty, in all fairness, Jen, you are the only you're the only one that's ever explained what the regulations actually are. If you go to the city and you go to the state, there's nothing there. They don't totally explain it. They can't explain why there's differences. They just can't. You just can't get any real. You're out here educating us, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and how much our membership appreciates that. But
Absolutely.
everyone else just kind of, you know, do whatever you want, kind of thing. Pay your fee, get your license, and be on your way.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, and I think Kaya will agree. I mean, it's a conversation we need to have with these folks, because we do get different answers between the city and the state, and it is very confusing for the operators sometimes. Even the register of vehicles sometimes is a matter of confusion. Uh, and uh, do we get them all in the same room? I don't know the solution right now, but I think Art is spot on when he says, there's a lot of inconsistencies and some confusion on licensing and things like that. Um, so
I know myself, from what I know right now, if I hired a city livery, SUV or van, and they were driving me home from the airport, and I get into an accident, and I hired a personal injury attorney, the first thing I would have them look at is whether they had the proper insurance or not.
absolutely.
If they have the proper insurance, then they got a big problem. And I think that a lot of operators that don't have the proper insurance have no idea as to what they're actually getting themselves into. They think they're maybe saving some money when in reality it can just put them out of business.
Yeah.
Same.
That's definitely it's a widespread problem, and we will start taking it apart piece by piece as the association, and I'm hoping that we can get some dialogue around a lot of this, because it makes when you call some operators and say, well, you're interstate and you need 1.5, they just look at you like you have 12 heads. They don't understand. Well, Joe sold me this insurance. It should be fine. Or, the city says 350 or heaven knows what else. So, part of these discussions is to break the barriers down and help people to understand what they really are responsible for, because the majority of people want to do the right thing. But in a world of confusion where they get a different answer from three different people, it makes it very challenging for them to understand. When you come, John, you always explain what happens with the feds, and it's
Very
clear to
clear.
them, you know. But
Sure.
yeah, crystal clear. But beyond that, city and state, we are constantly at odds with what's really required. So that's going to be, I think, a huge project for the board next year. Does
I,
anybody have any other questions?
I have one more, and this is
Sure,
a
go for it.
good question, but it's for clarification. We've addressed picking up at the airport and taking people wherever they need to go.
Yes.
That could be an interstate trip, and if it's going to Chicago, it could be exempt and all the other stuff. What if we're picking up in an area that's not exempt and we're going to the airport to drop people off? Do all of those requirements still pertain to that operator?
Yes, that would be the first leg of an interstate trip. So the
Right.
first or last leg of an interstate trip, you're operating in interstate commerce.
Yes. I knew that, John.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Johnny was testing you. I'm just kidding.
Well, I think that was for anyone that didn't know the answer,
No.
right? Art's
Yeah,
good about making sure that the word gets out.
right. So, okay, if there are no other questions, I'm just so happy that we were able to get everyone's attention today. And if there are other questions, definitely you can send them to us. I'll be sending the recording out to everyone who attended the meeting and the slides, but give us a day or so because we have to download this presentation and format it. Everything that we record, I was just telling Art this yesterday, we have 34 sessions that we've done, and they're all on YouTube and they're open to anyone, whether you're a member or not. You can go back and look at some of them and, spend a few minutes if you need to. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And again, those instructions will be in the communication that comes to you tomorrow, with the link to the recording and the slides. And I
Looks like there is a
personally
couple
want to
more
thank
questions,
John.
Paula.
Huh?
There's a couple more questions on the chat box.
Okay. Which ones do you want to go ahead and tell me which ones you want to cover today? Because John's going to be doing a follow-up session too. That's where I was getting to.
So I think, yeah, I don't see what questions. I don't see new ones here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either.
Looks
Is
looks
there
like that's
one?
all.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Looks like that's all I said.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So the plan is we're gonna look at the questions that came in, and if you have any other questions, again, just reply to us and we'll add them. And then based on the conversation today, John and I and Kaya and I have been talking about possibly a follow-up deep dive session into anything that was a particular interest sometime in December. So you'll get information on that as well. Are there any other questions?
maybe everybody on the call that's interested in getting on a December call can tell us exactly what they'd like to do a deep dive into and help us pick the topic that we do it because
Yeah,
we're
I'm
doing
going to
that.
put our name, I'm going to put our email in here. Okay, here's our email, info@illba.org. Feel free to send them to me and I'll pull them together. And probably the second week of December, I have to look at the calendar. We'll do some kind of a follow-up. All right.
Good.
If there are no other questions, I don't want to keep people longer than we have to. I truly appreciate your attendance today. I know the board does, uh, and Kaya and myself, as along with the rest of the board, want to thank you for joining us today. And John, as always, we appreciate your guidance and insights, and thank you so much for making the time.
John, Kaya, and Paula, thanks so much for putting this together.
You're welcome.
You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Again, John, thank you so much for presentation, and then we like to keep doing these things every month. It's very nice. Everybody enjoyed it, I'm sure. And also thank you for everyone joined to this meeting.
Yes.
And tell the other operators that they missed a good call today. Um, our coffee meetings are usually, pretty well attended. Thank you so much. But we're looking for more topics. I have some lined up for 26 already, but here's an opportunity for any of you that want to hear about other things, not just regulations, but we're planning some stuff on credit card fraud, some education on digital marketing, things of that nature. Anything that you want to hear more about, we have a plethora of volunteers who are willing to speak and educate you. We just need to hear from you.
Based on this call, as I said, I see a call with the city, the state, and John.
Yes.
Love to do that. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to do a call with a personal injury attorney and see where, if we're not following John's regulations and the city regulations and in the state regulations, where are we at? And if the city is not informing us of what John's regulations are, what we need if we're going beyond that zone, is there liability for the city? Is there liability for the state? Because I see liability for a lot of people that basically are issuing us license and saying we don't need this stuff, including the insurance brokers. Where's the liability at? Because I think there's a lot of liability to go around here if you get the right attorney.
You bring up the insurance brokers, and that's probably one that we have to really dive into too. NLA's been talking about the insurance crisis and stuff like that, but we haven't gone to that layer of, hey, you know what? What are people really telling the potential operator when they're going in to get insurance? And I know you've heard it, I've heard it. We get questions back from our own members who say, I've been told I don't need this. You're wrong, and this and that. And several times in the last couple of years, we've actually, some of us have actually called some of the agents and said, we're not sure you're giving them the right information. Is it a dollar and cents issue, or are you taking on the responsibility of making sure you advise your client properly of what insurance they really do need. Now, we do know some agents do that. And some actually will have you sign something. If you want 350 and they don't agree, they'll have you sign something because they don't want to take that liability. But that's not true that I know of for every agent.
Well, and the other thing to look at if you get a personal injury attorney involved in this is where you at with companies like, Uber and Lyft that don't have the same insurance that we have and are not following the regulations and are doing it a completely different way. Where do they fall in as far as what we've learned today? Like I said, I'd like to drill into it and just kind of see where all the liabilities are, if they exist, because I think I know where some of them exist, but I could be wrong. Typically, I'm not wrong, but I could be.
Oh my gosh, and I have to have that on the recording? Dang. Okay. Thank you, Julian, for reminding us. Today, the NLA has a broadcast at 1 o'clock on insurance. It's going to go over the insurance paper that they have put together. So that's open to everyone. I believe it's on the Facebook group, the NLA's Facebook group. So you might find that interesting. And also, there's a link somewhere there for the actual paper that has been put together. All right. I think we've done it.
Yep.
Thank you so very much, everyone. And look for the recording shortly.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.